So here we have Dr. Casey Wong, Hong Kong political artist and former assistant professor of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And I'm sure if you have attended the symposium yesterday, you had acquired so much insightful and empowerment from him, which I had it. And so he moved to Taichung in 2021 and is self-imposed exile in Taiwan. And I want to relate his profile to today's theme. Some of his work, I would say, involve impressively toying with political identifications, especially nationality, national symbol, flags. For example, his works attack the red giants in umbrella movement with a giant sculpture made of cardboard, which is built on the trolley as to warn about the red threat posted to Hong Kong from China. And it is not difficult to find a role of national flag or flag itself in his works, including Potting Home, Black Flag, and also Rebel Heart, which he will illustrate a little bit later. And also Calvin Tatara is the founder of the Museum of Hong Kong and currently a co-curator of Cha Chai Tea exhibitions of Ornament Museum and Gardens of London. With a background as a former lecturer at university, his expertise in Hong Kong and comparative colonial studies, where he has explored the colonial legacies that have shaped Hong Kong's unique Creole identity and cultures. And I would say he might be an encyclopedia of Hong Kong flag and colonial history today. So yesterday, some of us actually catch him for a tutorial, 5 minutes tutorial in the coffee break. So, and then last but not least, we have Justin Wong, a prominent political cartoonist and former assistant professor at Hong Kong Baptist University and dedicated to shaping the history of Hong Kong through his compelling artworks, and his creation serves a powerful visual documentary rich in subtle symbols that encapsulate the accents of city social movements. And in 2019, he created illustrations with 72 icons which reveal a timeline of events since the Hong Kong protests erupted in June. So we have the perfect combinations of panelists here in the field of arts, politics, history to loosen up the boundaries of connotations, as well as widen up our hope and imaginations. And we'll first have Calvin's and presentation, and then Casey Wong, and then Justin Wong. And please be prepared for your burning up questions because we only have 1 hour. And yeah, so please give an applause for Calvin.
So good morning. Everyone can hear my voice? Okay, perfect. It's kind of nervous. It's my first time to publicly speaking about the race I'm original from. So if anyone heard about Manchus, then you already know which race I'm referred to. But for those who do not know much about the Chinese history, this is one of the minorities, very important minorities in today's China. But of course, like the Tibetans, like the Uyghurs, we face the genocides from the Chinese as well. But today, my topic is not talking about genocides or human rights. We talk about the symbols or like the flags, what it can represent, the adversities or like the imagination for our next generation. So for this, always if we talk about symbols, we talk about flags, it's like only a Western ideas. We have coat of arms, we have family Christ, we have like modern flag, but in the Eastern way, in East Asia, it's also we have our traditions for this kind of symbol. So for those who can read Chinese, you can have a brief look on what is written, but for those for English speakers, so these kind of symbols, they are literally a horse mark for the bannerments of the Qing dynasty. So what is bannerments? You can imagine like a knight in European ideas. So it's not only for the Manchus, we also in Japanese, we have this kind of things we call mon. So it's also like a family Christ in the Eastern history. So these kind of things, they are kind of like having some interaction with Britain. So in the old days, we have the Anglo-Japanese alliance, and they also have some cultural exchange between each other. So imagine if you look into the official coat of arms of the Japanese monarchy, you will see a combination of the Anglo-Saxon idea and the Japanese idea. They combine together. It's kind of Creole and mixture. It's very interesting. Another heritage of myself. So Tankalele is a Portuguese loanword. So it means the indigenous people of Hong Kong, Macau, South Cantonese region, or Northern Vietnam. So they're original from a race called Viet. And when they clicked out by the Chinese confusions, they are living on the sea for 1,000 years. They are more like a doubter, or like even in the Chinese wording, they are subhuman in that period. So you can see this a painting from George Chinari. But why we have to use this kind of painting? Because when you look behind the Tankalele woman, this is a sheep. So this is called Jun boat, and this is one of the very important totem, and then is also a very important symbol in Hong Kong history. So before we talk about today's Hong Kong, we have some colonial legacy here. So in the left-hand side, we have the Hong Kong seal. If you look a little bit detail on it, you can see that it's a merchant ship. So it represents that Hong Kong was starting from trade, and which we talk about tea, opium, or these kind of things. And we have many behind stories of the Opium War, but I'm not going to talk about today. If you are interested, we can talk later. And we have right-hand side, we have the coat of arms is starting from 1959. But if comparing these two colonial design, I would say the left-hand side is more, the degree of the colonialism is much more intense than the right-hand side. Because in the right-hand side, it is not designed by the British authorities. It's more like while we fighting the Japanese in the Pacific War, Hong Kong was formed in Christmas 1941. So when our soldiers, the Commonwealth soldiers, they are captured in the concentration camp, not the Nazis one, the Japanese one. So they kind of believe that one day we can get liberation. So what make them to keep their belief and to keep them to have that hope on liberation, they start to design a new coat of arms for Hong Kong. So that literally is some freedom fighters of Hong Kong to create this kind of, you can say, colonial arms, but they are very less colonial image or colonial idea under this coat of arms. So you can see this is we can say the colonial Hong Kong flag starting from 1959. So these two flags, like the one I'm holding on my jacket, so these two flags are literally now banned in Chinese occupied Hong Kong. So either one, if you fly publicly in Hong Kong, you'll be in trouble, and very likely you'll be in prison. Apart from these two banned flags, which represent a very political idea, we have something that less political. So we look into the one with the pink background. So this is a symbol of the urban council, and it's also a democratic bodies in old Hong Kong. But it's very interestingly, it's not banned on 1997 when the Chinese start to occupy Hong Kong. It's more likely the Chinese Hong Kong government dissolved this democratic parliament in 1999 because they're quite afraid that we can have our own MP to speak for ourselves. So this one would be like a little bit political with a Bohemian design, the Bohemian flower, which is the city flower of Hong Kong. So in the same idea, we have the Festival of Hong Kong, which designed from 1969. This is a very political idea and first time to create a symbol for all Hong Kongese citizens. It's not about you are from the Cantonese ethnicity, not from the Tankalele, Chinese, or like British, Indian. We're all Hong Kongese with sharing the same home, the same root, and then the same idea, values. So you can see the Festival of Hong Kong in the left-hand side. We have the original design from 1969. And the middle one with the blue background is our modification starting to use in last year. So in the very corner one, you have the ship. So that is why I will first introduce about the 10 career story to you. Because for this one, Hong Kong Tourist Association symbol is used right before the war. So it's like in the interwar, we already have this kind of symbol to represent the Hong Kong indigenous history and then the legacy of our ancestor. So these is a design 3 years ago. It's for the 9th anniversary of the Hong Kong Festival, which held by my organization, Museum of Hong Kong. So these 4 flags will represent different ideas of Hong Kongese people. From the left-hand side, we have the Urban Council, of course, for those who more like Hong Kong became a dominion of the Commonwealth. And for the middle, we have the Union flag, or like the Britain flag. Is represent those who believe that Hong Kong should be a constituted countries of United Kingdom. And another one, some people will say it's colonial flag or Hong Kong flag, depends on their perspective. But this one might be, there will be more supporting to build Hong Kong into a British overseas territories like Gibraltar, like Falklands, like Cayman. And the last one would be the very commonly used in the 2019 protests. So people who are using this flag may be just simply a freedom fighter. But we want to display these 4 flags in together to represent that whatever your belief is, these Hong Kongese ideas should be remains in our heart. We are not using any flags, any design, any emblem, any symbol that is given falsely by the Chinese occupied Hong Kong government. So this is the last slide of my sharing. So it's kind of my own design of my organization, Museum of Hong Kong. So you can see I try to make into connecting the new and the old. Of course, inside we are very much like the Hong Kong arms from 1959. Why we keep using it is not I'm glorifying about the colonial past or like the colonialism, worshipping something imperial stuff, but you can see there is a cargo ship, like the Zhang ship inside. So because one of my ancestors are tank leader, I want to keep my legacy. I want to keep respecting my my past. So I keep the inside with the ocean, with the sheep, and then we have the fox. We used to have fox in Hong Kong, a wild fox. So now it's gone, just like the real Hong Kong geese, like the real Hong Kong geese history, it's gone. And we have the deer. In English, we call the barking deer. In Cantonese, we say "che ging." So it's like a deer that only appears at night. It's very scared of people because they believe that some people would like to harm them. Yeah, we have very familiar history. And on the upper hand, you will see the Bohemian symbol. It's like a like the same design of the Festival of Hong Kong starting from 1969. So in here, you can see a little bit like the Norwegian or the Viking Kunst. What is it? I'm not a very big fan of the Viking history, but this kind of wording is literally, we can say, an old script before the Cantonese or before the Viet, they adapt the Chinese characters. So we kind of like taking the same idea, we use them to modernization it, to make it into a alphabet system. So it's like, what it's saying is Hong Kong. In Cantonese pronunciation, we call Hong Kong. So we will say how we decide the symbol or how we decide the flag for tomorrow. It's very easy to conclude the idea. The first one is you have to respect your history. So I am not a big fan of colonialism, but Hong Kong culture is very much because of the colonial history, colonial past. We take some ideas from the British, from the Indian, from the Portuguese, or even Japanese for some sense. Then we generate our own Creole history. So the first part. And the second part is we have to avoid to being Eurocentric or Sinocentric, which is another polarized idea. And we have to respect for the indigenous part of of our legacy. So we have to respect our past, and we have to prevent to using any ideas that falsely add onto our bodies from the Chinese occupied Hong Kong government. So what is the next idea or like any other design? I would leave the floor to other two very successful artists to talk about more about the right design or like the proper design for the Hong Kongese people and the Hong Kongese community. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your introduction of the tradition of Hong Kong flag. I still remember when I was a kid in the 70s. I watched, I'm a kind of TV fan, and I watched the TV all the way until late night. And they have a closing program back then. And this white lady shows up in the TV. And then is the Queen Elizabeth. At that time, I don't know who she is. It's kind of like, okay. And then what's great about that image is they have a kind of superimposition of the Union Jack. And then they play God Save the Queen. Do, 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 and it lasts for like more than a minute. And for me, it always signified the end of television, a closure. No, I have to go to sleep. It's about 1 a.m., sorry. So for me, the flag is kind of like a graphic design, and people die for it. People would sacrifice their life for a piece of graphic design. That's pretty amazing. And as I grow up, I realize, wait a minute, our flag is not unique. There's about like 140 of them all over the world. In the empire, that's the sun never sets. Okay, that's the British Empire. And on the upper right-hand corner, you see is a typical standard issue Union Jack on upper left-hand corner. And then there's like a circle on the lower right-hand corner. And if you do your research, you'll find our flag is not unique. Usually, what's inside that ball would be other symbols. Ours happens to be the dragon and the lion symbol. And then other colonies of the British Empire have like other crazy symbols, like sometimes fish, sometimes a castle. Really, really low-level graphic design there. So after I realized that, I felt so sad about ourselves. You know, we thought, you know, growing up in the colonies, like they preach so much about the motherland. Like I want to go there sometimes, and then you realize you're not unique. You're just out of the production line. But of course, during 2003, the struggle for our freedom, we slowly, Hong Kong realized that we do need an identity of ourselves. And because after 1997, they hire architect designer, Hotto, to design the new Hong Kong flag, which is, if you go to Wikipedia, you see it's a red flag. It's still flying, this flag, kind of spinning white bohemian leaves with some stars in it. I felt so alien about this flag when I first saw it because it's red. I mean, I used to seeing flag that is blue. And then the stars in it. What's going on? I mean, it's at that time I didn't realize it's the communist behind the design. So that whole design competition was so controversial anyway. So for me, I basically rejected that insignia as a symbol of my city. And then I was participating in a lot of protests. And then I realized, hey, maybe the flag can be a subject to explore, to push the development of our movement, as well as to empower ourselves. Because back in 2011, 2 years before 2013, Hong Kong people were heavily involved in the localism movement, such as preservation of the village land, fighting against the Chinese development of the high-speed railway, as well as the preservation of the Queen's Pier. So suddenly we have these connections between our feet and our land that we stood. So a flag symbolized that, all right? Like we defend our land, we defend our identity, and therefore worth fighting for or die for. So I created this work. At that time, a small group of people start to reinvent our identity by looking at the colonial flag, and they kind of pop out the ball and then enlarge it into a flag. That's the laziest way of designing a new identity, which are quite effective, because you were talking about preserving our past, right? But it got to be something new, but not something totally unfamiliar. So that is called Long Si Kei, the flag of the dragon and the lion. And the protester would kind of like carry them, like maybe 15 of them, and then just wave it around really big. And it looks great on the street as a symbol of defiance, okay? It's kind of like, what can I do to piss off the Chinese Communist Party? I'll do that. So it's kind of like that kind of flag. Does it represent Hong Kong independence? Does it represent autonomous movement? I don't know. But at the beginning, you can tell this is something that would piss the Chinese Communist Party as well as the local government off. And that's why a lot of people are carrying that. And over there on the lower right-hand corner, you see I'm carrying that in the city streets of Taipei. And I was searching in my portfolio, and then I found out I have a lot of flag-related projects. One of the projects I've done back in 2014, kind of slow rise of the localism movement. That was a low tie of the June 4th commemoration sentiment. So I was thinking, how can I do a project to get more artists involved into caring about history, into using historical events to empower our own cause, our own search for identity. So I created the flag on the left. It's called Tomorrow 64. One time I was in China on the day of June 3rd. There was a conference like this, and then nobody's talking about June 4th in China. And then we go to lunch. And then suddenly one of the professors from China was playing on his phone, and he bursts out, "There's actually no tomorrow. 真的没有明天." At that time, the Chinese government was banning the internet. A lot of people try to fight against the government by on the day of June 3rd, they would post tomorrow, 明天, 2 words on the internet. And then the Chinese government banned it. So at lunchtime, he bursts out, 真的中国没有明天. China really have no tomorrow, meaning no future. So and then I was thinking, okay, I can guess tomorrow Hong Kong will ban June 4th commemoration. I realized that back in 2014. So okay, what can I do? Their English is not very good. The Chinese mainlander. So I can make a website called tomorrow sixtyfour.com. Then you don't know what I'm talking about, right? Because their search engine would always search 8964, and then they would get eradicated. And then on the right is a flag I created called Create More Days of Big Miracle. In Cantonese, it's called 大奇蹟日. If you're from Hong Kong, you know this term. It represents the stock market. The stock market, when it opens up, it just drop and falling, and then suddenly at the end of closing, it just bounces all the way up. It's like a big miracle day. Okay, actually on that day, I saw in the news that the former executive C.Y. Leung got fired by Chinese Communist Party. So I thought that was like amazing day to celebrate, because a lot of the time in the protests, like the Tibetan speaker was saying, we always see ourselves as victim, all right? And we become like self-inflagellating and sad. So I think sometimes we need to celebrate small little victories. Bad guys go down the drain, good for him, let's celebrate. Small victories, don't forget that. And then other flags come out, such as the Hong Kong independence flag, or the Liberate Hong Kong Revolution of Our Times flag. Right now, at this moment, 2024, we are in May right now. I think that's the biggest common denominator in terms of solidarity for the entire Hong Kong diaspora, the Liberate Hong Kong Revolution of Our Times. But sometimes I think about what does it really mean? What does it really mean? 光復香港, try to recover Hong Kong with light. Does that mean we're going to go back in time? And then where should we go back? Which year? If we have the time machine, should we go back to 1984? They say 80s is the golden age of Hong Kong. But I was there, I lived there, it wasn't that good. I speak English, but I can never work to the top because I have this face. It is the kind of life in colony. And then revolution of our times, yes, I understood that. I think the majority of the people was thinking like, let's make Hong Kong better. Liberate Hong Kong. By making Hong Kong going back to this more stable, calm, well-governance kind of Hong Kong. And of course, other people like Wang Po in the lower, Auntie Wang, she's waving just the Union flag. Because during that time, some of the Hong Kong people want Hong Kong to return to the control of Britain. And then you have the dying Bohemian flag. So for me, I think they are all bad design. They're not good enough because our course is more complicated. So I decided to just create a black flag. Next, please. And on the left, because I like the black flag because it's like the sum of all colors, all right? And then at that time, we are also traveling to valiant types of struggle. Right, you have the peaceful means of struggle, you have the valiant types of struggle. I support both camps. I believe if we're gonna have our ultimate victory, we have to embrace both camps. So, and also the flags represent mourning. And sometimes the government wants us to celebrate July 1st. I don't see anything to be celebrated about, so I just take the black flag and wave it around, march. And then in 2019, I start to realize that state-sponsored terrorism going on in our urban space, okay? I realize the terrorists are the Hong Kong government, the police. They are doing terrorism in our space. So how do you counter terrorists? How do you deploy counter-terrorism? So I study other terrorist organization and try to learn from their aesthetic. And this is one of my outlook when I go to the protest. This one is really cool. This one is the black hood with the 3 holes. All right, it's just draping like I'm the guy on the guillotine. And full black block with motorcycle protections. And the flag is actually made of a piece of big plastic garbage bag. They fly really well if you cut it in half because they're light and you can wave. So it signifies this kind of valiant way might lead to violence, might lead to death. So when at that time I go to the street, I see the police, you know what I do? I do this. And then I can see they're really afraid. You have to counter terrorists. You have to project an image so that the real terrorists would be afraid of you. This is about deterrence. For those people who love peace, have to really practice how to prepare for war. So this is the day of July 1st. I took my big black flag down outside in the morning of the day when they charge into the electoral. So I was walking around And then 2 years later, I escaped to Taiwan. And in Taiwan, there's a London Tunnel. And then I saw a poster of myself. They took this picture and they put a revolution of our time there. And then after I arrived in Taiwan, I continued to develop this concept of the black flag through videos. And I think, and now the flag on the top is actually the original Liberate Hong Kong revolution of our time, but I spray painted it with black spray paint. But so you can sit slightly, you can still see it. So for me, the black flag is an ongoing flag. It's kind of a in-between flag. So waiting for maybe your graphics to put on top. Thank you.
So actually, I'm not going to talk about flag at all. Instead, I'm trying to look at how visual arts were created and used during the 2019 protests, and how they finally developed into symbols to represent Hong Kongers. This is not 2019, okay? This is 2012 in the anti-national education movement. Well, first of all, just want to say that it is not uncommon to see artworks in the protests. If you remember Casey's artworks, every year you see his large-scale sculpture in the Hong Kong Islands. And then you see artwork is not uncommon in protests. And it is also a tradition for artists to create their own art and bring them to the street, like every July, 1st of July. Also, some of my artist friends, they all create their own banners with their drawings and put it up on the street. But this type of on-site artwork were mostly exclusive for artists, right? Only artists would do that. Sometimes the newspaper, like the Apple Daily, they will print like a poster for the protesters to put it up here like that. But most people won't do it. And the thing is, there's a limitation for that, because if you see like the physical artworks, only the people around you will see it. Unless you create large-scale works like Casey's, then it will be on the headline every year. Okay, but what we saw in 2019 was totally different, because most of the works were mainly circulate around the internet, and their functions are more than being a props in the movement. But if you trace back this trend of using online material, it's actually all start in 2012. That's why I put all those images here. If you still remember, they start to use this kind of gesture, like to say no. This is very generic, right? It can be anything. Say no to anything. And I think it is very groundbreaking, because in the past, like every year, 1st of July, we just walk and walk and walk. We just shout, and then we shout out the slogan. But gesture is like more or less one of the first time to do that. And more importantly, can't see it clearly because the resolution. Artists mainly, well, then you suddenly realize that this is a collaborative drawing by artists. And you suddenly realize, how come there are so many artists in Hong Kong? But it is not. I mean, they're all created by general public. Several artists start a campaign that, hey, let's draw like a character with this kind of poster. And then they invite their fellow artist friend to join. And this kind of, I also always say it's like a visual petition, right? 聯署, like we all do petition many times, but visually we also do it. Like, okay, I initiate an action and I invite my friend to join. And in 2012, it was like quite surprisingly, so many people have joined. Like this kind of collaborative works, which is like a foundation for the way of art making in 2019. Next, please. Yeah, in 2014, in the umbrella movement, similar tactics were seen. and they have successfully created, I would say, three major symbols to represent the protest. So first of all, it is the umbrella. I'm not going to talk about the background, the umbrella, but if you notice that umbrella is just like a container, you know, when a lot of artists and even general public, mainly graphic designer. Well, I did a research. I interviewed quite a lot of participants in the movement, and then a lot of them reflect that they actually start to participate in in the 2019 movement because they were inspired by the movement in 2012. And a lot of them were actually graphic designers. They work in the advertisement sectors. I still remember that, I mean, before, like illustrators, they were like, hey, let's do things together. Before that, those designers, they actually did things like that before the illustrators. But they never use their real name because they have jobs, right? They don't want to, you know, lose their jobs. Anyway. So in 2014, we see umbrella movement. We see the umbrella as a major symbol. Next, please. We also see the yellow ribbon, and lastly, the lion rock. Okay, the lion rock is a very interesting case because it actually evolved along the years. Okay, so and when we see these three symbols, if you remember. There were quite a lot of large-scale art installations in the three major occupied sites, right? In Admiralty, Mongkok, and Causeway Bay. And it was the time, I would say it was the time when the protesters, they realized that artwork is no longer just an artwork. They can be used as a tool in the protest, right? So this is like a shift of, you know, mindset that, okay, am I an artist? Well, I'm not an artist. I'm not entitled to create artworks. But in the protest, because of the environment and the vibe during the occupied in the occupied scene, they said, hey, I can actually do it. And if I create, so that's why you see a lot of adaptation of these kind of symbols, like the yellow ribbons, the yellow umbrella, even the lion rock. Later, I will show other examples. So it is a very important change of mindset that artwork is no longer just an artwork. In 2019, this kind of tradition continue. I'm quite sure that I didn't ask people, but I'm quite sure that the protesters, they adopt similar tactics in the umbrella movement, and they have quite, you know, conscious about creating symbols along the half years. This is my own work. The background of this work was during the time I was conducting a research about online political cartoons, and then of course I came up with, you know, the events in the umbrella movement. I find that the rise of the yellow umbrella is very interesting. So I started to think, in 2019 protests, actually, a lot of symbols actually emerged and were created. So I create this kind of pictogram to record the whole movement from the very beginning. It's like the 12th of June, the march, which is not many people, and then getting more and more people. So each pictogram represent one significant event. So you can see, actually, it ends around December of 2019. This work is like, for me, as a record of, okay, so these are the symbols that were created, but not all of them could continue to develop further. Okay, and let me see. But however, this 2019 scenario is different to umbrella movement because first of all, 5 minutes. First of all, there were no occupied sites, right? There were no large-scale installations. So all the works are created online. Secondly, the artworks that you saw in 2019, they perform very, much more functions that usual artworks did in the protests, especially in the absence of leader. And then you can think about, without a leader, how can you mobilize people to go on the street? So the artists, they will create posters to say, hey, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, and where, people will understood. So they use it as a communication tool among themselves. They will also use to document the whole protest. They will use it to comfort each other. They were used to discuss tactics among protesters. So in this sense, everybody, again, they no longer see these artworks as artwork. They were like the tools in the protest. That's why Sam also mentioned yesterday about like a group project. It's actually, they start to create some kind of workflow among them. It's like a factory. Everybody knows what part they could take, and everybody was willing to contribute. So in this sense, we will see, next please. A lot of symbols were created under these circumstances. I try to categorize into different groups. First of all, we see objects. For example, of course, the umbrella, the tear gas mask, the raincoat. Next please. And we also see the characters. Pepe the frog, Lin Ju, I don't know how to translate the piggy. And also he has his family, it's like a dog, and also the mongoose, the mongoose. And also we also saw the traditional Guy Fawkes mask in the V for Vendetta. Some other symbols were used to represent, the youth protesters, like when the girl's eyes were shot by the police. Actually, the artists, they create a kind of campaign that draw a character with the one eyes covered. And we also see traditional flag, like what Casey mentioned. We also saw the lantern flag, which was developed from the lantern wall as a very traditional way of using a statue as a symbol. Monument, this is quite interesting. I find it one of the most creative creation that the protesters use this kind of brick in this very simple form to put on the street to stop the police car to move forward. And also the line wrong that the protesters, for example, starting from the umbrella movement, they had a huge banner on the mountain. They create that kind of a human chain on the street, on the mountain. And this is the last one. This is a symbol that was created by Taiwanese designers, and it read Hong Kong vertically, but add oil horizontally. Okay, so I just want to say among these different types of symbols, some are fixed in the meaning. For example, the flag. This is very traditional that when someone creates a flag, you won't change it, right? This is because it's more like an official one. But for some symbols, their meanings were varied. And like Pepe the Frog is a very obvious example that it is just like a container. It could be used to represent different meanings. Yeah, and also another thing is we also saw two I think they are the most important icons that we still use now. After the protest, people tend not to continue using, for example, the tear gas mask because it's too sad or the mood is totally different, okay? So add oil, Hong Kong, and the Lion Rock is very generic, actually. Anyone can use it, even the pro-government people will find it, yeah, I mean, we used to use lion rock to represent the spirit of Hong Kong, right? To represent we are very hardworking, things like that. So when we use this kind of slogan or symbols, we're actually entering a battleground just to claim the ownership of that symbol. So now if you show, if you say at all Hong Kong, you'll be arrested in Hong Kong. If you remember, we have those slogans, Hong Konger at oil, and then Hong Konger resist, Hong Konger revenge, this kind of elevation of the mood, right? So it is important that we, so the symbols that we see in 2019 was totally different to what Calvin have presented. This is like from the bottom up approach of like a collaborative way of creating a symbol to represent themselves. So in future, I see when I moved to the UK a few years ago, I asked myself as an artist, also I'm political cartoonist, I often use flag to represent things. I use symbols a lot, right? Because that is the easiest way to communicate. If you want to draw a guy, Hong Kong or Chinese guy and a British guy, you use a flag to just draw the flag at the top, right? I asked myself, hey, maybe it is our duty to create something like what the guy said. Hey, designer, let's do something. But I think the icon and the flag itself is not the most important part. The most important thing is the process of coming up with a common value, a belief, or something that we can create a symbol that everyone can agree, right? But we can go for a direction, and then we can embrace like differences among, Hong Kongers. So, yeah, that is my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the guest speakers.